Hey everyone, my name is Jack. I'm a 23-year-old real estate investor and soon-to-be attorney, and on this channel I cover a variety of topics as they relate to real estate investing, the markets, and pretty much everything as it has to do with personal finance. So if you like that sort of content, be sure to have a look around the channel, and if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. Today I want to talk about landing a big law job, because it's something that a lot of law students and prospective law students might have their sights on, but they might not really understand how to get started, as well as the actual likelihood of landing one of these otherwise coveted spots. For those of you outside of the legal industry, big law refers to large law firms that typically pay the highest salaries to starting associates and usually come with pretty grueling schedules. We're talking about 70 to 80 hour work weeks on average to meet your hour requirements, since you have to bill a certain number of hours each year as a typical first year associate, really as any level of an associate at a typical big law firm. But like I said, it typically pays very well, so it's a very attractive opportunity for someone who maybe has a lot of debt right after law school, since you can smash through that debt by using your hefty salary to do it. And when I say high pay, I really do mean high pay. We're talking somewhere like $180,000 per year for your average first year associate at the largest law firms in the country. A lot of these first year associate salaries are posted online, so if you're curious as to what first year associate attorneys actually make at some of these large firms, you could usually just look it up. It's also a way to work with really large clients as well, if that's something you're interested in doing. For me, I'm going to become a real estate associate, so I'll be dealing with large commercial real estate transactions, which is something I'm really interested in. So that is another way that a big law career could be a nice springboard into better experience or experiences that you actually have your sights on. But I don't really want to talk too much about working in big law itself. I'll definitely be talking more about that once I actually start come this March, when I start as a clerk before I become an associate. I'm taking the bar exam in February, for those of you who are not familiar, but I was able to land this opportunity a couple years ago at the end of my first year of law school. So I want to run through how that process actually works and what sort of expectations you can have when you're applying for big law jobs. There are generally two ways to get into big law. One typically is where you do really well in your first year of school, and then you go through the on-campus interviewing process, as I'll explain in much greater detail in a moment. That's kind of one way to get in. And the other way is, if you missed that first sort of window after your first year, is to actually graduate, get a couple years of experience elsewhere, and then actually make it into big law that way as a lateral move, is what they usually call it. Lateral meaning from law firm to law firm. I'm going to focus mostly on that first one, getting it during law school, since that's something I just went through. Now, the way hiring during law school works is a little weird in that it's very rigid for big law firms specifically. Typically what happens is, after the end of your first year of law school is typically 3 years, so after the end of your first year, you get the opportunity to do on-campus interviewing, which is where law firms throughout the country or the city, depending on the level of school you're at, will come to the school and will interview as many students as they can, usually through some pretty rigid selective process. They might interview people who meet some GPA threshold or who meet some class rank threshold more often. And they'll do quick 15-minute interviews back to back to back with as many students as they can, and we'll just kind of be sifting through the student body that they've selected based on the resumes that were turned in. I think the big reason they have these is to make sure that you're a real person and you're not a complete weirdo. So they just talk to you for a little while and just want to make sure that you, the person, matches up with your resume, I think. But if things go well after this screener interview on campus, you'll go off to a second round of interviews, most often to the actual firm itself, where you'll meet the rest of the team. Sometimes these interview days really can take hours, and it might be a half day where you come in the morning and then have lunch with the team or something like that. They're usually pretty drawn out, and you're talking with a bunch of different people on that big law team that you got through the screening interview process with. If that goes well, then you'll get an offer after that, and there you go. You got your summer associateship, which is the first step towards getting an actual big law job. So this whole on-campus interviewing process takes place after your first year in the fall or really late summer leading up to your second year of law school. And this is where you're going for the next summer, so the summer after your 2L year. You're trying to get a summer job with these firms, so you don't technically get a full offer to become an associate, a proper attorney, after you graduate until you go through that summer program. So fast forwarding after your second year, typically what happens is you'll have your summer associateship, which will typically be something like 10 weeks. It's not a very long program. They'll probably pay you pretty handsomely, even though you're not really doing a whole lot because it's only 10 weeks. How much could you possibly do if you're brand new to a company? But you'll actually get a chance to work with the team members a little bit and get to know them better, and hopefully you set a very good impression, because Then at the end of the summer is where you get a job offer or not for after graduation. Most often, from the data I've seen, the vast majority of people who go through the summer associateship spot actually end up getting an associate offer for the next year. Every firm is a little bit different in how they do this, but most of them post their data online, and I'll go ahead and include a link in the description below where you can check out some of that data if you're interested in this sort of thing. But that's the general process. You do your first year of school, you go through the on-campus interviewing process after that. If you get a summer associate offer, then you do that after your second year, and then if that goes well, you'll get a full-time offer for after your third year, and then you'll become a full-time associate at whatever the big law firm is. That's typically the process that most big law firms will follow. Now, I personally was able to land one of these spots, and I'm not at an Ivy school or anything like that. I'm actually at a mid-tier law school, Chicago-Kent College of Law. It is probably near 70th or 80th ranked in the country, which is basically middle of the pack. It's a pretty decent school in Chicago, but it's not really going to carry a massive reputation outside of Chicago. The point is, it's not a Harvard where it's typically much easier to actually land these big law jobs as long as you get into the school, of course, which is hard enough in itself. But if you're at a mid-tier school like me, it is much more of an uphill battle from here. This makes the first year of law school extremely important for you if you're gunning for a big law spot, yet you're at a mid-tier law school. You got to make sure you keep your grades up. Things are on a tight curve in law school, so it's very hard because even if you might do well on a test, if everyone else also does well, all of a sudden you're in the middle of the pack and you're not getting a super high grade. But at the end of your first year, you're actually going to get your class ranking, which is going to be very determinative on what actual law firms you can apply to in the big law space specifically. Because most often there's going to be some sort of GPA or ranking cutoff. Usually it's something like top 25%, if not even top 10% for some firms. So if you're not towards the top quarter of your class, you're probably not going to really have a shot to even apply to many of these law firms. Of course, you still could apply and maybe you'd have a shot, but the chances of you actually getting in are very low, since it's already very low even if you are in the top portion of your class. I'll actually go ahead and include a copy of my old resume that I actually did use to get the job I eventually got, so you can kind of get a feel for what experience and what my grades were then, and that'll give you a better idea maybe of what to expect. Granted, everyone's situation is different, and my situation might not be indicative of yours, but at least it's a point of reference for what is possible, I suppose. Granted, things change every single year. Every firm is not going to be the same from year to year. My whole hiring process was before the pandemic, so that did make a big difference. However, it did throw a wrench in some of the summer program stuff, but that's for a different day. But I was able to eke into the top quarter. I was something like top 21 or 22%, I forget exactly. So I was able to actually apply to a good number of law firms, but not the top of the top that usually required top 5% or top 10% from my school. But I still applied to as many as I could, and even those that I wasn't eligible for, I sent in my resume manually to them. I even mailed a few out to try that out, where I put a folder together with my resume, cover letter, writing sample, all this good stuff, and I mailed it to them. Didn't actually work, but I tried. When it comes to trying to get a job like this, you really want to cast as wide of a net as possible, since these spots are not easy to get and a lot of people are going for them. And one thing that typically happens at the end of your first year of law school is the school or the student body or someone will decide who actually makes law review, which is kind of the premier publication of any given law school that allows you to write articles about various legal topics, but really all it means is that you either have really high grades in law school or you're a good writer, or both. And law firms are definitely going to take note of this when they're comparing students at something like a mid-tier school, especially. If you're not in law review, they might wonder why not, since you are at a lesser school after all. You're not at an Ivy League school. From my own research in looking at who the associates were in Chicago from my specific school, it seemed like pretty much all of them had been in law review at some point. Despite going to Chicago-Kent, they were able to get these big law jobs. And I think it really was because they were in law review. It's that one thing that pushes the application over the edge when you're not applying from a super elite school. It might not be an explicit requirement, but it seems to be very preferred from what I've seen. So if you're very serious about getting a big law associateship, but you didn't actually make law review based on your grades, I didn't, then you really need to focus on trying to write on to law review if that is an option to you, which I think it's an option at every single school. This is where you actually send in a sample article as a sort of tryout, and then if it's good enough, then you'll make it onto law review, and then you can add that to your resume before you actually start applying. You really want to take that seriously and try to get on the law review, since that is very important, I think, in any application, especially from a mid-tier or lower tier school. In my case, I actually had to send out my applications before I actually knew if I made law review or not, since I did the write-on process. I did not grade on, but thankfully I was able to write on, but I had to update all of these firms that I applied to ASAP, since they might have already thrown out my application, didn't care about me. This was actually a nice opportunity to stand out a a little bit since I was able to reach out to some recruiters that I had already sent my application to, said, hey, guess what? I made law review. Here's my updated resume. And that's a way to kind of put yourself towards the top of the pile again, I hope. I'm not really sure how exactly it works over at each firm, but it was a nice little thing that I could come remind them, hey, look at my resume again. I'm now on law review. If you're still considering people, then now hopefully I'm towards the top again. But who knows how it actually works. Whatever the case, definitely let them know if you already applied and you happen to make something major like law review or moot court or something like that. So you want to make sure you have really good academic performance, because if you don't, you're fighting a big uphill battle, since there are going to be many people who do have really good academic performance, and you got to supplement it with whatever you can. Ideally something like law review or moot court or big ticket activities in law school that can help boost your resume that much more. Now the other thing that is going to be important, depending on what you're applying to, is going to be any practice area experience you have. For me, I knew I wanted to do real estate, and a couple firms that I applied to happen to have real estate specific summer associate positions, so I was really gunning for those because I had some good real estate experience already, even though I was not that far out of undergrad, but I was working in property management. I was very interested in real estate. I had picked up my license at that point, I think, or maybe not, but whatever. I was very interested in real estate and my resume showed it. If you're not sure about what practice area you're doing, then just showing some general legal experience, leadership experience, all that good stuff, whatever you can do to make your resume as good as possible. There's a lot of career services at many of these schools that can be very valuable. Send your resume over to them, let them know what you should be focusing on in it, what you should highlight. They can really be a great resource for you while you're trying to put these applications together. The same goes for your cover letter. You want to make sure it's not just a regurgitation of your resume. You want to make sure it is unique, but also professional, concise, and ideally tells a little bit something more about you, maybe about something that you've learned recently that could be helpful to becoming a team member at their law firm, whatever it happens to be. Again, I would recommend reaching out to a career services office to see how they can help. One thing that could definitely very much help a cover letter is to name drop someone that you actually met with at the firm before you applied. This is what I did with as many firms as I possibly could. Being in Chicago, there's a ton of law firms here, so there's a ton of attorneys to meet as well. And as a law student, you sort of have this free pass to reach out to former alumni saying, hey, I'm a Chicago Kent alum, or whatever law school it is. I'm interested in applying to your firm. I'd love to learn more about your position and the job that you do. Do you like it? What can I learn from it? Any tips for applying? This could be great to ask someone who has already gone through this process and was in a position that you're trying to go for. In this virtual environment, asking for video meetings is certainly a way to go. Ideally, you'd ask for coffee and meet someone in person. That's what I did almost every morning for a couple weeks in a row, really a couple months. I was meeting with probably about 3 attorneys per week in the morning before work, and I would ask them about their job, ask them for tips, and then I could name drop them in my cover letter, since I could say, after speaking with so-and-so, I'm very interested in your so-and-so department, and I'd really love to learn more about that practice area. Or you could say something like that in your cover letter. All of a sudden it shows that you've taken initiative, you have expressed interest in the firm, you've talked to someone at the firm. That is a nice little check mark that not a lot of applications are necessarily going to have. You took that initiative, which not everyone will do. In a perfect world, you could also tell that person that you did apply, and then hopefully they'd put the good word in for you to the recruiter or whoever's actually doing all the recruiting for associateships, but that's not a guarantee, and don't be pushy with that. The point is, you want to be able to name drop and also get some good insight on what makes a good application, since every law firm is a little bit different, but you will find some parallels through talking with lots of different associates and even partners at these big law firms. Since the more you can learn about the position before you actually have to go and interview for it, you might know what to look for or know what to focus on when you actually get to your interviews. Oh, and before I forget, when you actually are applying, you're going to need a writing sample as well. So ideally, it'll be from something that you actually worked on at a job, but if you haven't had a law job yet, that is not uncommon. You can take an essay from your first year, since you're going to produce a couple memos and briefs during your first year. You can take a section of one, polish it up, and make sure it's ready to go as your writing sample. That's pretty straightforward, and you really do need to be a pretty decent writer when you're getting into big law, so hopefully you do have a good writing sample already. If not, work on really polishing it and focusing on your mistakes that you might have made during the year, making sure that thing is ready to go for turning into a law firm. Before this video gets too long, I hope this was helpful for learning about the big law recruiting process. It is fairly rigid when you're in law school. The big takeaways here I hope you get are, one, that your grades do matter a lot, especially when you're at a lower tier school where they're really only hiring the top of the class, or at least the top quarter of the class. That's going to be pretty difficult to do in a lot of cases. And if you can't get quite into the top 10 or top 5%, then you definitely want to make sure you can try to supplement it with things like moot court, law review, especially things that prove you're a good writer. Or even if you don't do that, having some solid work experience could help if you're going for a specific practice area. There is no magic formula, and it's going to be different for each person's situation, but that is generally how the process works. And if you have any questions about my experience with it, definitely let me know in the comments below. And like I said, I'll post my old resume down there that I used when I was applying, so you can get a nice point of reference. And because this video is about careers, well, more specifically a law career, I wanted to give a shout out to Andrew Moe. He is a fellow YouTuber. He also talks about careers on his channel, much more focused on careers, but specifically about data science careers. So if you're looking for a different high-paying job, this could be a great path for you to take, and it doesn't require law school, as in my example. So if it's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. He has a lot of great content over there. I'll go ahead and link below to his channel. But anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you like this video, please like it, since that would help the channel out a lot. And if you like this sort of content about really careers, but I also talk about personal finance, investing, real estate especially, if you like that sort of content, be sure to have a look around the channel. And if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe, since I put out new videos every single week. And check out my other links in the description below for free stocks from Webull and Robinhood, and there's lots of good free stuff down there, so take a look at that. If you end up signing up for a lot of those links, they are affiliate links, and that would help the channel out a lot as well. It's a win-win. There's some free money down there. Please go and get it. But until next time, take care.